Murder attempt survivors. What happened? 9 years ago. Buddy got jumped at a house party. I jumped in to pull the guy off of him. Attacker ended up pulling out a knife and shanking me in the stomach before fleeing to a getaway vehicle. Police were called. Caught the guy. We were supposed to come into court to point at him and be like he did it, but the day before he pleaded guilty. No idea what happened to the guy after that or what his punishment was, but he probably didn't learn anything from the situation. Me, I feel completely fine. Sometimes I forget that I even got stabbed. I feel a little uneasy whenever someone has a knife in their hand and it's not dinner time. But that's about it as far as trauma goes. A pregnant drunk lady called an ambulance. I was working with a junior colleague, but a female one. The patient said she thought she was in labor and was sat on the floor, legs open, knees bent, with a blanket over her lower part. There was a small table next to her. Glass top wooden coffee table thing. My colleague asked to examine her, and for some reason she got angry and insisted I examine her, not my female colleague. After a bit of back and forth, I knelt down and went to lift the blanket to have a look when there was a sudden crash. My colleague had put her foot through the glass table and was standing on the patient's hand, which had a huge knife in it. Turns out she wanted to stab a paramedic, and when we turned up she chose me. My colleague saw it just in time and saved my life. Patient had already had several children who were in care and had fetal alcohol syndrome. I was asked for a statement when the next one was born, and they were also taken into care. She got away with the premeditated attempted murder on grounds of mental health. My mum was incredibly abusive. On one occasion, I was around 12 and she came into my room while I was sleeping and stabbed me in the chest with a kitchen knife, puncturing my lung. I didn't know this at the time. Obviously this woke me up and I just rolled out of bed and ran around the house screaming. Someone on our road noticed the noise and called the police. Just before the police arrived, she started choking me and I lost consciousness. I later woke up in the hospital and mostly recovered. She's now in jail. This is not the only time that she tried, but it was the most dramatic and came the closest to actually killing me. Not me, but my friend's mom. A co-worker of hers was stalking her, obsessed, convinced he was in love with her and nobody else deserved her, that kind of thing. Eventually he came to their office with a revolver. She was bending down to put files away, or something similar. He quickly approached her from behind and shot her in the back before immediately shooting himself in the head. She survived, obviously, though the wounds were significant. Incredibly fortunate she wasn't hit in the spine or major organs. I often wonder how different it would have played out if she had been standing or facing him. More than likely she would be dead. This was before my friend was born, and his mom made a most lethal recovery. Still has chronic pain and PTSD, but she can walk and has a job. Not reclusive or unfriendly to strangers. Terrified of guns, of course. But that seems fair. Both my friend and her are extremely lucky. My heart dropped when I saw this question. I was 15 and my dad plotted to murder me. My dad had only been back around for a few months after being homeless for a while due to his 20+ year meth addiction. He had never been violent towards me before, but I later found out he had tried to kill my mother just months prior and she brushed it off as him having a PTSD episode. I came home from school. He surprise attacked me by suffocating me with a pillow, strangling, and attempted to sexually assault me. I had just gotten a boyfriend and wasn't around as often, and by the language he used when trying to assault me, it was clear this was the source of his anger. He had the TV turned up to an extreme volume so no one could hear me scream. I ended up being able to get up and run to the bathroom, the only room in our house with a lock. He grabbed the door, but I found a sharp object in the bathroom and told him to back up or I'd kill him. I somehow was able to shove the door shut and lock it. He tried to get in the bathroom but couldn't. He actually said, "I'm leaving," and closed the front door to try and lure me out. It was quiet for a while, but then I heard him breathing outside the door. He eventually left after a few hours, taking my money I had hidden in my bedroom, and called a relative telling them I'd been in a terrible accident and he needed a ride to the hospital. He ended up running when dropped off and was missing for a year. Most terrifying year of my life. His body was found by a fisherman at his favorite lake growing up. They found high levels of meth in his system and it appeared to be a suicide. Later, when investigating the home I was attacked in, they found hammers, duct tape, knives under my mom's mattress and looked like he very much so intended to kill me. At the beginning of October, my husband was trying to buy a PS5 on Let's Go. He wanted to make sure it actually worked, so he gave the guy our address. I told him a dozen times that he was going to get robbed. He still had the kid come over. As soon as he got there, he pulled a gun, grabbed the cash and shot twice. One hit my husband in the abdomen. The second went through the stairs behind him and traveled 30-40 feet to the kitchen. I heard the commotion and ran downstairs and chased him away from the house. We got to the front gate and he pulled his gun again and shot at me. He missed my head by less than 2 inches. He was caught and is being charged as an adult 16 for 2 counts of attempted murder and a variety of other charges. I was in Thailand, heading back to my apartment from a popular corner of bars in Chiang Mai. I went down the same streets and alleys I always did, cutting through the center of the city to the edge of the moat by Ram Hospital. I passed by the technical college and saw a group of guys hanging on the corner. I didn't think anything of it as I entered the final alley that would put me at the moat and my apartment. 2 mopeds passed me and went into a alcove to my right, and as I passed it they zoomed out and cut me off. 4 guys hopped off their bikes and one approached and said, "Where you going?" and decked me in the face. As I think, did this methodica really just punch me in the face? I look up and he has his arm up and holding something in a swinging motion. And I did the only thing I could, put my arms up to protect my face and yell out. After several blows to my arm, I attempted to turn and run, but his buddies were there to stop me and kept cutting off my escape. After a couple minutes, cold bean lessits, all a bit of a mess of memory, they all hopped on their bikes and dipped. I have no clue why, maybe it was my yelling, and I looked down at my arm. My left arm, below the wrist, was cut halfway through. One of my bones completely exposed, marrow and everything, my hand hanging uselessly at the end, and I immediately knew I was in deep shit, even though I didn't feel a thing. I have minor medical training, so I took note that no arteries were severed, but I was bleeding profusely and needed help. I went to the guest house nearby and asked the attendant for help. Poor thing looked faint when she saw me, lol. She got me in her car and took me to Ram Hospital, literally 100 yards away. Turns out what the guy swung at me was a machete according to the doctor. I thought it was a cane or rod of some sort. So that's my story. It's important for me to say I stayed in Thailand for a year after this event, despite friends' pleas for me to get the duck out and come home. I wasn't about to let that shit ruin a lifetime opportunity for me. Anyway, I have full function of the arm and hand now. And after 4 years of drinking to bury the memory, I'm happy to say I started therapy 6 months ago. I quit drinking entirely, was diagnosed with PTSD, and am finally addressing the demon who's been hiding in the depths of my mind. And that methodica has his days numbered. Not sure if this counts, but a junkie found the home I had made for myself inside a hedge and wanted very much to stab me. But he was pretty drunk, and it didn't work out for him. He just left after I took away his knife and kicked him a few times. It was pretty shocking for me, and was the incident that got me making an effort to get my life back together, start working again and finish school. When I was 11, my stepbrother 16 started sexually abusing me, and my little sister didn't know this until much later. She was 8. We had just moved in with him and his family, and it was 5 states from my mom. We didn't know anyone, and my dad took him volunteering spending time with me as him being a nice older brother. After a year, I started to realize that this was seriously wrong and started to fight back. One night, I just got fed up and sick of the shit, so I told him no, and that I was gonna tell my dad what was going on. He started to strangle me, and I believed he would have killed me if my dad didn't come stumbling home from the bar. The next day, I told my mom what happened, and she told my dad. After talking to my sister, he sent me and her on the next flight home. to live with my grandparents. He said he tried talking to his wife about it, but she called us liars. He stayed married to her another few years before getting a divorce. I've seen my dad maybe 15 times since it's happened. I've never really told anyone about this but my partner, because the one person I expected to be there for me really wasn't. I feel like he betrayed me and my sister. He may be able to drink himself to forgetting, but I can't, because I have a scar on my neck as a constant reminder. I was at a party and was talking to a guy. My ex-boyfriend saw this, was crying, and lured me into a room where he locked the door, proceeded to beat me, and then attempted to strangle me. I was screaming for my life, but no one could hear me over the music at the party. Meanwhile, another friend was searching for his coat that had his cigarettes in it. It happened to be in the room we were in. He realized the door was locked and asked the homeowner to get the key to the room. When they got the door unlocked, they found me being strangled by my ex, but they were able to get him off me in time. I always thank my lucky stars that friend needed a cigarette. When he did, probably saved my life. I asked my former boyfriend to leave the apartment when he had gotten drunk. Him being drunk and the two of us having a disagreement usually resulted in a black eye, or worse. 3 days prior, he dragged me by my hair across the floor and into the bathtub, cut my cheek with a kitchen knife, then told me he was my killer. I left the apartment and asked him to be gone by the time I returned. I came back half an hour later to find his car gone. Thinking he'd left, I walk into the apartment from our porch area because I just had this feeling that something was off. I walked in and called out his name, seeing if he'd respond. Nothing. Our porch was connected to the living room. As I was walking through the living room, I called his name again. Nothing. I got to the kitchen and saw him hiding in front of the refrigerator holding a metal paper towel holder. You wouldn't have seen him from the front door as the refrigerator is behind a wall. That is the hallway from the front door. He pushed me into the counter and started hitting me with the paper towel holder until it broke, and I was on the floor, yelling for help with my arms blocking my face. When I began yelling for help, he started using his fists and only paused to grab a knife from the drawer. He tried to stab me with the knife. While I was down, I grabbed it and pulled it from his hand. The blade cut his palm and he stopped his attack. I tried running his hand under cold water when he started attacking me again. Grabbing the knife, pulled the knife from his hand a second time, cutting his palm again, screaming for help. He then ran out of the apartment through the patio and into the street. I grabbed the knife in case he decided to double back, but he had fallen in the parking lot. A neighbor heard me yelling for help and called the police. I saw him on the ground and called for an ambulance. When I turned back around, he had gotten up and ran off. He went to jail. I went to rehab and began rebuilding my life. Now I've got 2 children, a house, and I'm stable. I don't personally remember this, and only found out the story after I told my mom I have fear of looking out windows at night. Apparently when I was 3 or 4, I was in the kitchen with my mom one night when a man came through the kitchen window and tried to stab her. My father ran in with a gun and shot at the man. He climbed back out the window, and the police never found him. Another time when I was 13, we lived in an apartment complex my father owned. At night the laundry room needed to be locked up and the change emptied. The change was close to around 100 a night. I would normally lock up the laundry building around 10 p.m. It was a really rough neighborhood, so my father had a large dog, Rottweiler Malamute mix, and he was trained to walk with me everywhere. I was a very small girl and I'm sure that dog was a big deterrent for a lot of people. Anyway, one night I go out to close down the laundry building and my dog won't come inside with me. He is barking up at the sky and won't follow any command I give. I cleaned up the building and gathered the coins, and the whole time my dog is standing by the door looking up at the sky. I lock up the door and turn to leave, and a man jumps down off the roof. He has a huge knife in his hand. He yelled something over my dog losing his mind, barking and growling. He had a crazy shit-eating grin on his face. He then tried to run at me, and my dog jumped up on him. I ran back to our apartment, and my dog stayed back to fight him. I told my dad what happened, and we ran back to get my dog and find the man. My dog was stabbed 3 times and needed to be hospitalized for days at the vet. He pulled through and lived many more years. They never found the guy. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe.